Shalom to everyone who has come to this video. A woman in my family who I respect recently told me that she was never, quote unquote, in love with her husband, and that romance is irrelevant. And when she told me this, I thought to myself, hey, that's beautiful, because she has been married for about 35 years. Meanwhile, almost every other woman who is her peer, including her sisters, etc., are all single older ladies. Many of them left their husbands. As a side note, this relative of mine was also a virgin when she married her husband, and she's never committed adultery. So she's only been with one man her entire life, and I've already thoroughly covered in a previous video how a woman's sexual history plays a role in her ability or lack thereof to be a faithful wife. In this video, we're going to address the topic of love and romance. As I already stated, this relative of mine said that she was never, quote unquote, in love with her husband. She also explained to me in so many words that her decision to marry her husband was more of a logical decision than an emotional one. She believed at the time that she could trust him and that he was a virtuous man who would provide what she needed. Therefore, she decided to marry him. The idea of falling in love and falling out of love with someone is not a biblical concept. The concept of falling in love is associated with infatuation, which is temporal and fleeting. This is why you hear the same people who allege that they fell in the love often exclaiming at a later date that they've fallen out of love. These are the ideas about love that we are inundated with through Disney and Hollywood programming, which programs your mind to think in these terms through the process of introjection. Many of you have heard the Alicia Keys song where she says that she keeps on falling in and out of love. Now, does that sound like something you can build a marriage on and a family? Love that you fall in and out of? This superficial concept of love is not a solid foundation to build a family on, to build a community on, to build a culture or a nation on. And make no mistake about it, functional marriages are the foundation of every functional society. All of this is centered around the idea of romance, and obviously the root word for romance is Roman. As it says here in the highlighted words, it says the word romance comes from the French vernacular, where initially it indicated a verse narrative. The word was originally an adverb of Latin origin, Romanicus, meaning of the Roman style. As it says here at Etymology Dictionary, it says romance, circa 1300, romance, a story written or recited in verse, telling of the adventures of a knight, hero, etc. Often one designed principally for entertainment, from Old French Romans, verse narrative, modern French Roman, also the vulgar language, originally an adverb in the vernacular language from vulgar Latin, Romanis scribere. And for those who don't know, Latin is the language of the Romans. It says to write in a Romance language, one developed from Latin instead of Frankish, from Latin Romanicus, of or in the Roman style, from Romanus, Roman. Again, the idea of romance and the idea that you fall in or out of love is not biblical and is a Roman concept. When speaking of the word love, it is the Hebrew word ahaba as a noun, and the action of love is the root word of ahaba, which is ahab, which is a verb. As shown here in the following scriptures, this is Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 9. It says, "Live joyfully with the wife whom thou lovest all the days of the life of thy vanity." The word translated there as lovest is ahab. Here in Judges chapter 14, verse 16, it says, "And Samson's wife wept before him and said, Thou dost but hate me and lovest me not." What is the word there for lovest? It's the same Hebrew word, ahab. Here in 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 5, it says, speaking about Elkanah, it says, "But unto Hannah he gave a worthy portion, for he loved Hannah, but the Lord had shut up her womb." The word therefore loved is the Hebrew word ahab. Here in 2 Chronicles chapter 11, verse 21, it says, "And Rehoboam loved Maachah, the daughter of Absalom, above all his wives and his concubines." The word for loved is the Hebrew word ahab. Here in Esther chapter 2, verse 17, it says, "And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti." The word there for loved, where it says, "And the king loved Esther," is the Hebrew word ahab. All of these examples are speaking about love between a man and a woman, and all use the same word in different inflections and syntaxes. And here is the word that's being used, which is ahab, as I already told you. And as I already stated, it is a verb. And it is the aleph, the hey, and the bet. And again, it means love. Now, as I just pointed out, the word ahab consists of the aleph, the hey, and the bet. What you see on the screen is the evolution of the letter aleph over time. The early Hebrew and the middle Hebrew would be a pictographic symbol that shows an ox head, which denotes power, authority, or leadership. And over the process of time, it developed into what we have as the modern aleph. So again, the first letter denotes strength, power, or leadership. Again, the Hebrew word ahab, which is a verb meaning love, consists of three letters, which is the aleph, the hey, and the bet. What you see on the screen is the evolution of the letter hey, which again was originally a pictograph, which is an image of a man with his arms out, which means to reveal or to show, or it can mean breath, or to look, or to display. All right, we've looked at the aleph and we've looked at the hey. Now we're going to look at the final letter in the Hebrew word ahab, which is the bet, which, as you see on the screen, was originally a pictograph of a tent's floor plan. And the letter means a family or a house, or to be amongst, or to be within. Now that we've seen each respective letter and its meaning, we can see from right to left the aleph, hey, and the bet, because Hebrew is read from right to left, which again spells ahab, which is a verb. we can see that it means strength, leadership, authority, revealed or shown within or amongst the family or the body. And we know that the Most High Yah is that power and authority that is supposed to be seen or revealed within and among us. That's why the law of the Most High states here in Leviticus 19:18, it says, "Thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people." So as it says here, according to the Most High, it's illegal to take it upon yourself to get revenge or to bear a grudge against another person who is a part of the Commonwealth of Israel. And it says, "But thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord." And that word love again is a verb, is ahab. You're going to show the love by your actions. And a part of those actions is that you are not going to hold a grudge against anyone, nor are you going to take it upon yourself to seek vengeance or revenge on anyone. As I said, love is a verb and is associated with action. And as you perform these righteous actions, you are showing care and affection for someone. And this naturally grows over time, or at least it's supposed to. As it says here in John chapter 15, verse 13, it says, "Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends." This is the precipice of love. Many of us have had people in our lives that we were willing to die for. Most men who are solid would die if need be to protect their wife, which is why you should choose a wife carefully, because sorry to say, but some women wouldn't actually mind if their husband died. So you don't want that kind of wife. And vice versa could also be the case. Some men wouldn't mind if their wife happened to stumble down the stairs, if you know what I'm talking about. So it's best to be careful about the character of who we marry. This is John chapter 3, verse 16. It says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life." What this verse here is explaining to you is that the Father loved the world so much. He loved the people in the world so much that he gave his only begotten Son as a sacrifice, so that those who are in the world may be redeemed unto eternal life. And here in John chapter 10, verse 17, it says, "Therefore doth my Father love me, because I laid down my life that I might take it again." This is the Messiah speaking. He says, "No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down of myself." So the Messiah elected to lay down his life because he's being obedient to his Father. No man is taking his life from him. He's laying it down of his own volition. It says, "I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it again. This commandment have I received of my Father." This is why the first time that the word love, which is the Hebrew word ahab, is used in the scriptures is here in Genesis chapter 22. Starting at verse 1, it says, "And it came to pass after these things, that God did tempt Abraham, and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here am I. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains, which I will tell thee of." So the Most High is testing Abraham, telling him to sacrifice his son Isaac. And it says, "whom thou lovest." Again, that's the word ahab. And this is a precursor to the sacrifice that the Most High did of the Messiah. Abraham was willing to sacrifice his son, whom he dearly loved, because of his love for the Most High. Likewise, the Most High was willing to sacrifice his son, whom he dearly loved, because of his love for the chosen, for the elect. This is 1 John chapter 5, verse 2 through 3. It says, "By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and keep his commandments." So that's how we know that we love one another. That's including loving your wife. That's including, if you're a woman, loving your husband. When you love the Most High and keep his commandments. And it's going to explain further. It says, "For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous." So what is it to love the Most High? It's to keep his commandments. It's to be obedient, because his commandments are teaching you how to love, and love is an action. It's the action of doing those morally upright things that the precepts of the Most High are teaching you to do. I want to make clear that in biblical culture, people would often arrange marriages, so that sometimes the two who are getting married would barely know each other, if at all, before being married. The reason why this worked so much better than our marriages today is because the parents of both young adults were all a part of a real culture that had real virtues and values. The children were both raised in patriarchal families and taught and trained how to be a husband or how to be a wife. Since they both came into the marriage already understanding the expectations and duties of a husband and a wife, they were able to function well together once they are joined together in marriage. They would grow over time to care for one another and grow accustomed to one another's personality traits after being married. As it says here in Titus chapter 2, verse 4, speaking about the older or the more experienced women, it says that they may teach the young women to be sober, to love their husbands, to love their children. You see, women are to be taught how to do this because it's an action. They need to be taught how to love their husbands and their children. It says to be discreet, chaste, keepers at home, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of Yah be not blasphemed. How many women do we know of today who are discreet, chaste? Somebody needs to go look that word up. Keepers at home, good, and obedient to their own husbands. For example, those who are familiar with the marriage of Isaac and Rebekah that you can read about in Genesis chapter 24, you know that Isaac did not live around or grow up around Rebekah. And you know that they essentially became acquainted when Rebekah was brought by Abraham's servant from Mesopotamia to the land of Canaan to marry Isaac. In this chapter, we can see that Rebekah did not even know who Isaac was when she first saw him. As it says here in verse 63, it says, "And Isaac went out to meditate in the field at the eventide, and he lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, the camels were coming. And Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she lighted off the camel. For she had said unto the servant, What man is this that walketh in the field to meet us?" You see, Rebekah doesn't even know what Isaac looks like. And the servant has said, "It is my master." Therefore she took a veil and covered herself. So she's being humble. It says in verse 66, "And the servant told Isaac all things that he had done. And Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent and took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. And that word for loved is the same word, ahab. It says, and Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. And as it says here in verse 65, she did not even know who Isaac was when she first saw him, even though she was being brought to him to be his wife. The notion that we are supposed to date 100 people before we decide who we are supposedly in love with and decide to get married is an erroneous notion that typically ends in failure, as we can see from our marriages and families today. This is 2 John verse 6. It says, and this is love, that we walk after his commandments. So again, I can't make it any more clear than that. Love is to keep the Most High's commandments, because that's teaching you to perform the act of love. And then it says, this is the commandment that, as you have heard from the beginning, you should walk in it. In other words, it's the same thing that we were being taught all the way back in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. It's the same thing that the law teaches. This is why, as the conduit and distributor of the Most High's commandments, Christ himself said this in John chapter 14, verse 21. He says, he that hath my commandments and keepeth them, he it is that loveth me. You see that? You love the Most High through Messiah, through Mashiach, when you have his commandments and you keep them. Again, it's an action. It says, and he that loveth me shall be loved of my Father, and I will love him and will manifest myself to him. This is an example in biblical culture of how a woman performs the act of love towards her husband. This chapter, Numbers chapter 30, goes into the subject of vows and oaths that a woman makes. And it explains that any vow or oath that she makes, her father has the final say. But if she's married, once she has a husband, that authority transfers from her father to her husband. And now he has the final say in any vow or oath that she makes. And in biblical culture, a vow is taken very seriously. A vow is anything that someone declares or promises that they're going to do. And the only exception are women who are widows or women who are divorced, according to this chapter. And it says, every vow and every binding oath to afflict the soul, her husband may establish it, or her husband may make it void. So that means every vow or declaration or promise that a woman makes, her husband has the final say in whether or not she can do it. And it also says every binding oath to afflict the soul. That means every time she swears that she's going to deny herself or abstain from something or fast, her husband has the final say. So for a woman to submit to this is to love her husband. Likewise, as a husband, a part of loving your wife is to take responsibility for her, because this is actually a protection for the wife. As it says in verse 14, it says, but if her husband altogether hold his peace at her from day to day, then he establisheth all her vows or all her bonds which are upon her. He confirmeth them, because he held his peace at her in the day that he heard them. That means when he hears his wife declaring that she's going to do something, or promising, which is a vow, or if he hears her swearing to do something, which is a bond, and if he does not correct her, if he does not tell her, no, you can't do that, then it's considered a confirmation. It means he's in agreement with it. And verse 15 says, but if he shall any ways make them void after that he hath heard them, then he shall bear her iniquity. In other words, if he waits till a later date, he already heard what she said she was going to do, and he didn't correct her. He didn't tell her, no, you can't do that. But he waits till a later date, and then he tries to make it void. And then he tries to say, no, you can't do that, at a time where it's practically too late. Well, whatever sin she's committed by doing whatever it was that she said she was going to do, or whatever problems have been caused by what she promised she was going to do, whatever sin comes about, whatever iniquity, the sin is on him. He bears her iniquity. The sin is not her sin. Why is that? Because he has to take responsibility for her. He is her head. So as a husband, a part of loving your wife is to take responsibility for her according to the precepts of the Most High. Shalom.